Peace, family. It's your boy Zay P. Zay P. The I am. I am that I am, as you are that you are, for we are all that we are. So I just wanted to say welcome to all you beautiful souls who have joined this group, the I Am Aligning Mentorship Group. I appreciate everybody who's wanted to work with me. I apologize right off the bat because I know I've been a little bit out of it the last couple of days, so I haven't been as present in the group, but I just wanted to make this quick post just to introduce myself a little bit more officially and formally to all of y'all, so that y'all know who I am, what my knowledge and skill set and expertise may be, ways that I may be able to assist you, and just to just let you know a little bit more about me and the purpose of this group and what we're doing here. So right off the bat, I am Zay. That intro that you just heard was part of the intro that I do for my YouTube channel, Zay P. The I Am. Zay P. The I Am is me when I'm connected with my channel state. The primary being in essence that I work with regards to working with spirits, working with higher sources of wisdom. I channel in my higher self. I channel in the I Am essence. In all actuality, the I Am essence is an aspect of my higher self, or vice versa. My higher self is an aspect of the I Am essence. The I Am essence runs through all of us. So that said, just a little bit about this group. Well, more so, a little bit more about me. So I've always been a bit of a spiritual seeker my entire life. I grew up New York City, Bronx, New York, born and raised. I still live in New York today. With that said, I've always been a bit of a spiritual seeker. So, I've had the history of, I did a few years of Catholic school. My family, my mother was supposedly Christian when I was young, but she was always a bit of a seeker herself. So she dipped and dabbled while I was growing up. And I got to taste a little bit more with regards to Islam, Judaism. I've always had like the spiritual text around my house and stuff like that. So I've always been able to explore. I've always been interested. I always had an issue with religion. My issue with religion is that while there were certain things in there that resonated with me that you can just tell is truth, there was so much that did not resonate with me. There was so much that I couldn't wrap my mind around. For instance, within Christianity, one of the pivotal commandments of Christianity is thou shalt not kill. Yet Christians had the Crusades in order to force Christianity across the globe, right? So with something like that, that is a huge, atrocious, hypocritical act, if you ask somebody like me, right? Don't tell me I cannot kill, and then I look up and I run around and I see all of the people in authority who's telling me not to kill historically have spent years and years killing. So things of that nature always never really let me get too involved into religion, but I could always resonate with truth when I heard it, with spiritual truth, with higher truth. So that said, I've always been connected to what I called the knowing. I never understood what the knowing was, but the knowing, to break it down, was just like, as I understand it now today, after my full arc and to where I'm at now, the knowing is, it is a clear, and the clear is clear cognizance, which is just that ability to just know. You just know things. You go within, you tap in, you connect, and you can connect to truth, right? And so I've always had that connection, which is why even when I was young, since I was a kid, I was always considered the kid who's like wise beyond his years. I was always considered that kid who, I always had that knowledge and the words to uplift others, but I could never really seem to apply that to myself for some reason. And I've always been the idea guy. So as I grew up, I've seen myself help others become pretty wealthy, and help others become more of their best selves, simply by just being able to tap in and connect and sharing truth and insights and coming up with ideas, being a creative. And so I've seen other people grow. I've helped other people grow, but I've never been able to give that to myself until now. Like most of us on this path, as spiritual seekers, as workers, right, as light workers. I had a very traumatic filled upbringing. Um, Addiction ran in my family. My mother was a drug addict when I was a kid. Single parent household. Me being the oldest of my mother's children, I ended up having to shoulder the burden and responsibilities of raising my younger siblings. Um, with that said, I did the best I could, but I was a traumatized, damaged kid trying to help raise other kids. So, looking back now, I probably didn't do the best job, but I did the best job as I could at that time. That also said, I was born with a debilitating condition, a disease called sickle cell. So I've always been in and out of the hospital and dealing with complications health-wise. Oddly enough, between the trauma in my household and the abuse and the addictions between different family members and my own health issues, that somehow managed to keep me safe from being in the streets, so to speak. Because whenever my knuckleheads friends was out there doing dumb stuff, first getting guns, first starting to do like rob people, just horrible things like that. Obviously, when you're friends with people, they want you to come along. They want you to be part of the crew. They want you to do all these things. I could never do it because it was always something like my mom was on a 3-day bender on drugs somewhere. And so I was the oldest in the house and I had to be around to take care of my little brother and sister, right? And I would do things like shoplift at the local supermarket so I could bring home food while my boys was running around streets with actual guns robbing people. And so they were doing all these things because they were just idiots, knuckleheads, right? And I was doing some things, but most of the things that I did was pretty much for survival. That said, that brought me to a place of just constantly having to be present for my family and for others. And so I was never really allowed to have that time to indulge and get caught up in a lot of the negatives of street life. Always been pretty smart, and so I did okay in school and eventually leveled up to become get into college, things of that nature. This is young adulthood we're talking now, right? So from there, in young adulthood, I kind of reverted and I had my second childhood. If you study psychology, you'll hear this term a little bit about the second childhood, which is pretty much so. My second childhood, a young adulthood. And this was just like I finally got some freedom. I got away from a lot of the trauma. I got away from a lot of the people in my life that were causing trauma. You get away from shit when you go away to college. Even though I didn't really want to go away at that time, I did. And I had my opportunities to explore and do all sorts of dumb things. And so I did, which most people do when they're first entering college, when they first get that taste of freedom, things of that nature. So, but all the while, I'd always been a spiritual seeker. I always had the inclination to lean into and study and learn more, to want to try to cultivate myself into being a better person, just because I knew how much stuff I've been through in my life. I knew there was a lot of healing and there was a lot of things that needed to be worked on. And it's a continual process, as it always is, right, for everybody. So that said, even though I was having my second childhood, so to speak, and I was just being immature and wilding out, at the same time, I've also been very astute and very much kind of an observer and studying things. And so I still managed to continue on my spiritual seeking and trying to just get some insight and get answers. Throughout this period, I had multiple small awakenings, or what others might call epiphanies. People often hear the word awakening and think it's something drastic and life altering. I've had one of those also, but the smallest epiphanies, anything that a realization that comes to you that affects your life and helps you to change your own behaviors, that is an awakening. So I had awakenings about forgiveness, typical first love stuff, boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, they get together, girl breaks boy heart. There's a lot of trauma and things involved in that issue that helped bring about my awakening on forgiveness and the power of forgiveness and how important that is. Because I noticed when I hadn't forgiven, my anger and resentment and bitterness filtered into my life and tainted other things that I really, really loved. And so to get back to the purity of that, to get back to myself, I had to learn to forgive. I had other awakenings throughout that period. At some point in my 30s, I found out I was going to become a father, and this triggered probably my biggest dark night of the soul. I won't say, like, I've had dark nights of the soul. People have these often without even realizing. We just think it's depression. We just think it's, sadness. We just think it's dealing with that unsatisfactoriness of life. But these can all be considered dark nights of the soul. And so, the way I grew up, my entire childhood was a dark night of my soul. I was at that point very suicidal, throughout my life, through my early life anyway, into my young adulthood, and I started to come out, and I had my own freedom and my own ability to build myself up. I came out of that, but throughout life, there's different moments. Becoming a father definitely triggered another dark night of the soul, because it caused me to question who I was, what I had accomplished up to that point, what type of father I was going to be, how I was going to provide, these types of things, how to be a decent guy, do right by the woman who was having my child, and things of that nature. And so I had another big, major dark night of the soul. And it was weird because it was a beautiful time, right? With a newborn son and just all these new things happening. But internally I was struggling, and I was drowning, right? I was in a job that I really didn't want to. I felt like evolved past, and I was ready to move on. I felt limited in. I didn't really see any way to provide or anything of that nature. Still dealing with my health, my disability, all of these things. So, I had that dark night of the soul that I was there for a few years trying to figure out what my next steps were. Eventually coming to the point saying I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to finish off my communications and marketing degrees, because I had left so I could pursue acting and DJing for a while. And so going back to school, I started that process. And then in 2016, one night I was like in some manic mode, and I was doing a lot of research and a lot of self-development stuff. I've always been big into just trying to develop myself and become a better person. Because I've always had that fear that I was so fucked up from my past that I always knew that if I was going to do anything, I had to fix myself. So I've always had this thing of self-improvement and self-development. And so after becoming a father and trying to figure out what I was going to do, deciding to go back to school, I'm still in that phase of like, what's next? How do I keep myself better? I'm reading books like Think and Grow Rich and William Waddles and all these other things, right? And then I stumbled upon this audiobook on YouTube, and the book was just labeled "Warning: This will change your life." It didn't say what the name of the book was. I'm glad it didn't, because if I had, I would have been turned off. So the name of the book was called Conversations with God. And the reason why I said I would have been turned off is because, like I told you, I had a thing against religion. And so I had been working on just developing and cultivating my own spiritual truths. And so anything labeled or titled Conversations with God sounds very religious and sounds very maybe secular or whatever. And so I stumbled upon this video. It wasn't called that. It was just labeled "Warning: This will blow your mind," or "Warning: This will change your life," or some shit like that. And so naturally, being the curious cat that I am, I listened to the book. I was like, I just hit play and let's see what this is about, because it came up in that cycle of self-development stuff that I was digging up, right? And so I knew it had to be pertaining to somehow self-development, but I wasn't exactly sure how. So I just played it just to start, and I got completely consumed by that book. And I think I finished it in like 2 days or something like that. And those next 2 days, while I was going through the book, my mind was literally being blown. The funny thing about it was not being blown by all this newfound truth or newfound information. It was being blown by all of this validation of stuff that I knew internally, stuff that I had said, things that I had already chosen to believe, chosen to align with, because they just seemed like universal truths to me. And so the validation and then the taking of that information and going deeper and deeper and really connecting with spirit blew my mind, right? So I spent the next couple of days kind of crying, just heartbroken, just in awe that I didn't know any of this, that I did know this, but I never went with it because it's not the norm. And so feeling like I had somehow betrayed myself because I'd spent my entire life listening to what the world said as opposed to connecting with that truth within. Anyway, that was the shift for me. That caused my conscious awakening experience. It was a Kundalini experience also at the same time. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but I've always been connected with energy. I just never knew it. I thought for a while I had Tourette's, and I was actually right prior to this point looking into getting tested for Tourette's because it was getting so out of control, how much energy would come into my body, and I would have spasms and shocks, and I would be yelling out of nowhere, like just, looking crazy. And it's one thing when you can do that privately and keep it low key in your own house by yourself. It's another thing when it starts happening more and more and more. You're out in public and you don't understand. You get hit by shock waves, and and you're with loved ones, or you're with people that you're cool with, and they seeing you twitching and spasming for no reason. So I started thinking maybe I have like some sort of mild form of Tourette's, and I was looking into getting diagnosed with that. When I had this experience, it all came together, right? So I had this experience, and it literally felt like there was a crack that opened up in my head, in my skull, a crack right here. I even heard it in my head, a little. And the best way I could describe it is that everything flew out of my head. Everything that I knew, everything that I've studied. And I mentioned, I've always been kind of a studious person, like even in college. I've had a fear of addiction because of addiction running in my family. But in college, as an experimental phase, I was that dude who I would research for hours each drug before I experimented with it, right? Like, what are the addictive properties? How likely am I to become addicted to this? Because I didn't want to fuck with anything that would make me addicted, right? So I'm like researching weed. I'm researching LSD. I'm researching mushrooms. All the things the college kids are doing, right? Like, that's the type of person I was. So my mind was just filled with all sorts of knowledge. But the way my brain worked, it was very siloed. It was very, this is math, this is social studies, this is history, this is this is what that. Like, that's the way my brain was organized. Somebody told me later that that's kind of a typical thing with men, that we're able to kind of separate things and keep things organized like that. Upon this experience, I had that cracking sensation in my head, and then what felt like everything that I knew came out, just flew out of my head. And for that moment, I felt like I knew nothing. I felt like I was in the void. And I just felt a cloud over my head with all this information that I had amassed over a lifetime. All of a sudden, just kind of like spiraling, all coming together and finally making sense. All of the pieces connecting, right? How math connects to history, how history connects to science, how science connects to this and that and the third, and just the overlying multi-layered nature of our reality. It all started to make sense. And then, just like that, after it all spiraled together and became one amorphous mass of just being, it came right back down into my head, right back down into that crack, and let's go, and sealed up. And that was literally the sensation. That's how I felt physically. And after that, my world changed. I fell into the spiritual rabbit hole. I became absorbed in all sorts of esoteric studies. I had already been practicing Reiki. I had already been a little bit into alternative forms of healing. That took off to the next level. I started to realize those energetic sensations that I felt was Tourette's was actually just energy in my own ability to tap into energy, to connect with energy. That slowly grew into more energy healing, more energy work, to channeling, starting to use more divination tools, whether it's using oracle cards and things of that nature. Nowadays, I'm a little less likely to use divination tools for myself. I do use them a lot more for others. They provide a great permission slip. If you study somebody named Bashar, he uses the term permission slip, and a lot of life is all about us getting permission slips. Like, we need to feel things are okay to do something before we are willing to do it, or we need to feel okay. We need to feel like we have that permission slip to accept this piece of information or accept this truth. And so something like cards or something like that, I felt was more useful for others than for myself once I really started tapping in and just being able to talk to spirit and just being able to connect with guides and like actually having like literal conversations with source, having literal conversations with Jesus, having literal conversations with Merlin and all these other beings. And so that their guidance has always been encouraging me to connect more and more directly and use the tools less and less. The crystals help for certain things, or whatever the case may be, but just knowing that I am the ultimate tool. And so that was in 2016. I've been on this whirlwind with spirit for the last 4 to 5 years now. Sometime in 2018, I finally said yes to spirit, to walking that path and doing what felt aligned with what spirit wanted, with what my higher self wanted, and realizing that what me, my lower self, this physical vessel wanted actually wasn't aligned with my higher self. I just had never been willing to give that control, right? To say, well, no, I'm going to go with what my higher self has planned out for me. I'm going to go with destiny or whatever the case may be. I'm going to do what I want to do, and damn all that, right? So when I finally said yes to spirit, all sorts of doors flung open. My gifts blew open even more, flowered even more. And then I finally came out publicly as far as doing this spiritual work, doing regular YouTube videos, creating a platform, building an audience. Now, this mentorship group, all sorts of things of that nature, probably in 2019. But probably years before that, people would see that I was becoming more and more on this path of spirituality, more and more awake in my awakened state and things of that nature. So there we are. That's a kind of quick surmisation of who I am and how I got here. And the idea for this particular group, and I know I've kind of touched upon it before and I've shared some posts in the past, but the idea for this particular group is that for those of y'all who watch my videos, who see me do lives, who got in sessions, who recognize my own connection and see that as some sort of light for your own connection, some sort of example, who recognize me as somebody who can offer some sort of guidance or some sort of insight that can help you on your path. That's what this group is about. I can't work with everybody, unfortunately. One-on-ones are super expensive sometimes for some people. There's all sorts of reasons, but I do want to work with as many people as I can. I don't want things like money to interfere or to stop people from being able to connect with me, to connect with messages. And so this group is one of the ways that I'm offering that, to be able to work with me, to be able to work with spirit, with my guys, for me to be able to work with your guys and tap in and bring in all sorts of messages, and to really help you cultivate your own connection with spirit. This is nothing about trying to get people to follow me or be my disciples. I ain't shit. I am of the no thing. We all are of the no thing, but I'm finally to the point where I can get over my ego and say, I am not doing anything special that any of you are not capable of doing yourselves. And so it is my role to provide that guide and to provide that ability that allows others to really enhance and be their greatest selves, to connect with their highest selves, to connect with their own Christ conscious nature. And so I think that's a pretty good wrap up of who I am, of what I'm doing, and what I'm offering here. I just wanted to do a quick intro. This is not so quick per se, but this intro is just really so that you and the group can have an idea of who I am, what I'm about, what this group is about. And Raquel, you did an amazing intro the other day. I had meant to do this video a while previously, but like I said, this past weekend I've been dealing with my own health stuff and I've been very laid up. And so I'm still having some pains, but I'm fighting my way out of it. I'm getting back to normal. And so here I am. showing back up. So thank you all for joining this group. I appreciate everybody who feels any sort of resonance with me, and if I can offer any value, I'm here. And I'm very grateful to have y'all confidence. So much love. Peace.